Hi friends, I'm Andy Green, and today we're talking about giving yourself permission to be a parent. Do you ever know if you're ready to be a parent or not? Well, let's find out, because this is the Naked Man Podcast. I met Elissa Klie in one of my first screenwriting classes at Ithaca College, where the semester goal was to write a feature film script. I don't know about Elissa, but this was my first feature script I'd ever written. It was about as stereotypical as a first script can be, a male bonding comedy called Bro Trip, adapting a road trip I had taken the summer prior with one of my best friends at the time. As for Elissa, she was tackling far more dramatic, meaty subjects. Her script felt more personal than mine in a way that mine didn't, even though mine was based on my real life. I only remember one note that I gave her revolving around a scene where two characters discuss Steve Harvey's performance as the new host on Family Feud. I was skeptical and didn't think Steve held a candle to the classics like Richard Karn or Louis Anderson, and suggested the conversation take after my opinions. Needless to say, with Steve Harvey still hosting the feud and doing so in a way that has elevated the show and kept it relevant when there are infinite things to watch, I was very wrong. It took me 11 years, but when reconnecting with Elissa this past year, I finally apologized for my grievous error. Elissa was kind enough to forgive me. In the years since we met in that class, Elissa has lived the New York life as an actor, voice actor, writer, and teacher. But her newest adventure is, I imagine, the biggest and scariest: mother. Her vulnerable posts chronicling her pregnancy and now the first 5+ months of her daughter's life are what inspired me to reach out to her. I've been moved by Elissa's transparency through it all, how challenging it has been in regards to her art, her employment situation, her body, and her mental state. I admire Elissa's bravery, which she's taken to the next level with Pump Up the Jam, a story sharing a glimpse behind the scenes of a breastfeeding working mom. Children are still the next sort of vague stage of my life for my partner and I, but as an artist without a shred of stability, I frankly needed to talk to Elissa and wanted to make sure she knew she had someone to talk to in me. And I'm so glad she took me up on the offer. So now I think it's about time to start that conversation. 11 years in the making. Elissa Klie, welcome to the Naked Man Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like straight up honored that you would reach out to me and want to have this conversation.
Me too. I'm honored that you said yes and that you got it and that we're doing this. It's the surreality of it is sort of a high on its own for me. Like, I have no idea what we're doing, and that's exciting.
I agree. It also made me like, after we got in touch again, like jump back into that class and like what that even was. And I'm like, oh my God, you like read my first script, like gave me notes, and like vice versa. Like, what a just vulnerable thing in and of itself. Like, we didn't know each other. I think we're like sitting next to each other. We were like, we could be partners.
Yeah, no, we were partners. Yeah. And I feel like we were both very helpful. And also, I mean, I was terrified every single time to share stuff because it was a new thing for me.
So terrified. They went on like a cross-country trip.
Yes. My two characters, meaning me and my friend, I think they were even the same names. Like, I think I might have changed my character name, but not Joe.
Was there someone who had to go to the bathroom on the side of the road? Was that one of the scenes?
That seems like a scene that I would have.
Okay, because I was like going back through it and I was like, I feel like one of like the big issues was like someone had to relieve themselves on the side of the road, like the one you don't want to do on the side of the road. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that might have been a better scene than I think what I had actually, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, most of my stories are about relieving themselves. Yes. Yeah. Well, and this is about relieving, I think, some stress or anxiety about something that I don't know if it ever goes away, if there ever will be. And I sort of wanted to, and I think we're already sort of jumping into it, but I wanted to ask you, how are you feeling in this moment? On this wonderful Zoom call.
On this Monday?
Yes, on this month. It's a Monday. Yes.
Well, I have 2 weeks off from my like normal teaching job. So I feel like in a way wonderful. I like that I have the time off to like spend as, with my daughter that I don't normally have. I work like at least 45-hour weeks, like in the school building, meaning that I'm working way more than that. So
what are you
it's
teaching?
Bizarre how I teach 5th grade English at a charter school in the Bronx. Yeah. So it's just the sheer amount of hours. And I've never had a 9-to-5 job, right? I've been an actor. And by 9 to 5, I mean like 7:30 to 5.
Right. My partner is a kindergarten teacher. It's even worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So the teacher, my whole family are teachers, and you don't really understand teaching until you're like in it and you're like, oh my God, this is so hard.
Yeah. It actually feels like, the writing brain or the creative brain for me never turns off. And it seems clear that the teaching brain is the same way, or at least you're not even allowed to, because you have to be working from like the moment you wake up at 5 a.m. to like 8 p.m. or even later. Cause like there's work when you get back and
Right. And everyone's always like, but you have summers off. And you're like, that's true.
Sometimes I know you probably are doing other things, and my partner has had to like Lyft or Uber during those times. It's like,
right. It's not exactly. Yeah. It's not like you're like making like, insane amounts of money where you're just like, oh, like I did that for 10 months and now we good. Like, yeah.
If anyone deserves 2 months to just, make it rain with money, I think it is teachers.
Right.
Yeah. Education is the most important thing. But, whatever, we're just going to abuse you until our kids get to college, and then like that solves anything.
Right. Well, that's the whole thing, right? There's so much pressure, I think, today on like kids and teachers, like just because education is just so, it's always been a big deal, but now it's just like, I don't know if it's like the globalness of the world or like the access to information or just how much technology is changing. But like, there's just so much pressure on everyone to succeed in like testing and this and that. And like, maybe it was like that when we went to school, but like, I feel like it wasn't that big a thing. You know what I mean?
I think if I'm making this up, but it feels like our generation was the first one where it started to feel like that, I think. But I think it's only gotten more and more. And it is just like more and more people, more and more competition, and also just less and less resources and, opportunities for the same, for more people, basically.
And now you go into school knowing how much debt you're going to be in, right? Like, I feel like we didn't really like understand that.
We had a nice naive thought. I actually was fortunate and privileged to not come out of it with debt, but that hasn't necessarily made my life after like walk in the park. Like here I am making no money talking to you. Why am I not getting paid to talk to you, Elissa? I don't know. Just kidding.
You soon enough, because I'm asking that question too. You should be. I also I feel like I'm so excited that you even have this podcast, I got to say, because I think as artists, we're always like, what else can we do? How do we connect with more people? How do we like broaden our network with helping other people and like just creating like some kind of platform we wish we could watch or see or listen to or whatever. And I'm always like, oh, I should start a blog, or like, I should have a podcast. Like, what would I do it on? And like, you have all these ideas, but like, you're actually doing it. So it's only a matter of time.
Well, that's really
nice. It's got to be, right? It's got to be.
And it's sort of, it's that thing where I try not to do anything for money, but then and that's also sort of a block of mine of like, I tend to chase the things that are not going to lead to that, because there's something, especially as an artist, it just doesn't feel like what my motivation should be. But I also, like you said, this is a mechanism for connection and like literally an excuse to be like, hey, if I just probably reached out to Elissa normally, I'm sure it would have been fine. But it's just like, hey, I have a podcast. That's like legitimate.
I'm very similar to that. And like, just like being very, I don't want to say scattered, but like not even just like constantly searching for like a thing or the thing. Or I think as much as that feeling tends to like suck in a sense, like when you're in it, I feel like I can say from having like a normal job, whatever that means, for the past, year and a half, because I only started teaching when the pandemic hit. We were basically like, my husband's health insurance, he had SAG health insurance through like this date. And then he was going to lose his health insurance. And we were like, oh, like if we're going to try and have a baby, we should have health insurance. Like, why don't I be a teacher? Like, let's try that. This was like how much thought went into this, because we both lost our jobs during the pandemic. We were like worked in a restaurant. So I was like, why don't I just like, I'll try this for a little bit. I'm like, we'll have health insurance and like, it'll be cheaper to have a baby. But I will say that the trade-off of like not running from this, that to that, right? Even though I am still doing things on the side, like voiceover stuff, doing readings, doing whatever. So I still have that to some extent, but like, as much as you think like, I'm so tired from doing this, from running here, from like feeling so pulled in 100 different directions, like it is exciting. Like it's fucking exciting having that flexibility and that like determination and like excitement for what you're after. And I feel like that's something that like in my current life or current job situation, like I don't have that. I'm like, I wake up, I do this, I do that. Am I going to get my lesson planned for tomorrow? I don't know. But like, that's the extent of it. It's not like, I never feel like I'm chasing a thing.
And do you feel uncomfortable when you're not chasing a thing?
Yeah.
Or like something's missing. Like, wait, why am I? Because it's not like you're just sitting there being like, everything's perfect or whatever. Like that feeling never will happen. I know that. But like,
right. It's just not as like, I like that passion and that like fire that comes from like this need to express myself in some way.
Yes.
And like, I think that's what, I wrote. I know we had connected. You had read that post of mine about like the fucking worst day I had, like, or the worst week I had as a parent thus far. And like, what was that? It was like 3 months into parenthood, right? Like,
don't minimize it.
Right. But exactly. And but I had, it's interesting. My acting teacher like commented on that post and said something like, you're a complex feeling human being. You're always going to be a complex feeling human being. And I hope you find the outlets that you need that serve you, that like make that a little bit more manageable. And like, let me say one thing, because I feel, I don't know. I just feel from everything that you've said about wanting to be a parent and that anxiety and that whatever, like all things that I felt for like a full decade, because I've always wanted to be a parent. I've always known that I wanted to be a mom. And I've always felt like everything needs to be set in my career before I get to do that. Everything has to be set so that I can do this. And like, I spent literally like 10 years of adulthood being like, this has to go like this. Otherwise I'm not going to be ready to to be a parent. Like, I won't know how to be a parent if I can't even get my career where it needs to be. Like, and so much of that puts so much like unnecessary pressure on you. I feel like having to make that, always feeling like I had to make that choice, or I was going to have to put off the rest of my life because my career wasn't where it should be.
Yeah.
It put so much pressure on me that I feel like I would start to like lose the joy of creating. Like I would start to lose the joy of going to auditions because the amount of pressure on getting this role, because this would be the role that did something in my career. This would be, if I get this audition or this job, or if I do well in this performance, that's going to lead to, and whatever it was always like some fucked up mind game of like,
yes,
you're not there yet. And this is like the one opportunity you have to make everything go right. And if you don't make the best of that opportunity, like you're not allowed to have the rest of the things that you want in your life.
And also all that thinking is also sort of taking you out of the present in those moments where you need to, right? Like you're probably, I'm sure you did great and fine in most of those things, but it was making it harder to be present, making it harder to be there and to appreciate the fun and play that like why we're doing it. Right.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll take that as a compliment, but like, no, a lot of the times I didn't do well. I did shitty because it was like, you know what I mean? You're like, I'm not present. And that's literally all you have to be when you're an actor. Like, that's the main thing.
Right.
If you're not present, like nobody fucking cares how much work you did on the scene. If you're not present there, it's a waste of time.
Right. And I was actually, that was sort of where I was at before this, because I had that split feeling. And I was sort of like, I don't know if I put as much preparation or thought into this interview as I have in the past, because I've been sort of juggling more things. But then I had that realization too of like, you know, I've done the work, and also like I need to be here with you and listen. And that's all that really matters, you know, and as long as you are comfortable and we're both comfortable. And I think that I think I did that work. And that was sort of like, it's a lot of the times it's just me trying to be hard on myself and be like, oh, this, you're not ready for this. You're not ready for this. And it's like, I sort of created a podcast where I could be ready for it by sort of rolling out of bed, just as long as I am, you know, on. And on is a very loose term of like, I can hear and speak.
Right. Right. I mean, the name of it suggests you don't even have to get dressed in the morning.
That's a good point. I'm wearing pajamas, Elissa. I am wearing pajamas. So
what else would you be wearing?
Exactly. You know, I was actually worried about the name, but that like I had the idea for that name. And then I was like, oh, that maybe gives the wrong idea. But everyone was like, no, you have to keep that one. But this is the moment that I dread, where I'm like, I feel like I trail off because I forget where I'm going. But it was sort of, I was going to ask you, well, actually, sorry, do you have something?
I can have something if you want me to.
Ooh, I would love to see if you have something.
Well, I think like just going off of like having those, I feel like we discussed what we were going to talk about. And I have like so many things that I like would love to share, and so many, but I guess knowing yourself, right? When I started studying with this new acting teacher probably like 6 years ago. And his whole concept, and he's brilliant in what he does, is he finds people's acting niches. So before you can work with him in his class, you have to get niched by him. And basically it's like a 6 or 7 hour process. It was like blew my mind. He asks you all these questions where you give like, just like you don't prepare at all. You're just like, you give him, you know, like, who are your favorite actors? Great. What movie give me 3 of them? Great. What movie do you associate with them? What movie? And blah, blah, blah. And all these questions go into figuring out like what your essence is, because everything that you are attracted to, like he can whittle down to find like, what's the common denominator between everything? Oh, that's your essence as an actor, as an artist, as a person.
Yeah.
So your essence as a person has to match up and align with every single character you play. Let's say you get cast in something that it doesn't really match up with. You figure out how to align it with you, because you're going to like be doing your best work if your soul is like vibrating at the same vibration as your character's soul.
Right.
Which allows you to like get out of being stereotype cast, right? So it's not like, oh, she always plays like, because they'd be like to me like, oh, she always plays like the drug addict or the hooker or like the bliss, you know? And like that's your brand? Right. But let me tell you why, not knowing, it would always be, I'd be setting these things, but it would be like, oh, she always plays the this girl or the that, you know what I mean? Or like the blonde this. And this opens you up to be like, okay, once he niched me, and I'm going to tell you what my niche is, right? Okay. It made my whole fucking life make sense.
Oh my God.
In a horrible way, right? Where you're like, no, I'm trapped in this forever. You got me fucking kidding me.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
So I remember he gave me the niche and I just started hysterically crying, which normally means like when that happens, like you're seen, right? Yes. Someone is like, and I see you and I appreciate who you are, you know?
Yeah, there's truth there. Yes.
Like, I just like lost it. I was hysterical. And he just like handed me a box of tissues. And I was like, does everyone just want to cry when they come here? And he's like, some do. And that was it. He was like, very whatever. before he gave me the niche, he was like, so you got a lot going on. And I was just like, yeah, but like I'm an actor, right? And a human. So like everybody has a lot going on, right? You know, and he's like, no, not everyone. And I was like, oh.
I like this guy.
Okay. So he niched me as I play lost women at a critical crossroads or turning point in their lives who often struggle with addiction, abuse, or like male/daddy issues. And I was like, what the fuck? But it makes sense that I was cast as like the hooker, the this, the that, right?
Yeah.
But you can also see like, it's not the profession. It's like you're lost and you're codependent with someone, or you're self-medicating because you're lost, or you know what I mean?
Right.
So it lends itself to certain types of characters, or like the leading lady or the this. You're like, no, I'm just somebody who's like in the middle of a crisis trying to fix my life. That's just me always. But he spins it in this positive light of like, that's your bliss. That's what you follow. So like the sooner you can embrace that's not saying I've done that, but the sooner you can embrace that that's who you are. And that's really where when you're figuring that shit out and you're on that track, like that's when you're like the most free and the most you, like the more your art will like be able to come through. And the more you can channel what you know about yourself and what like fucks you up as a person and like trips you up and gets in the way, the more you can like actively channel those issues into your art.
Right.
Like free yourself up.
That's incredible. And also like, I love the idea of being niched. I'm just sort of mulling over that. And now I can't help but be like, what's my niche? But then I'm also like,
I'll put you in touch with them if you want.
Well, I'll bring it to myself in a second. But I wanted to just say, like, I love like the lost woman or lost person going through a crisis. That still is every leading person too. It just normally is sort of like love life. But I think that can, or whatever, you know.
The good news, I was like, I'm in everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you write a story about someone who had their shit together? You wouldn't.
Yeah, no, exactly. Conflict. Oh, yeah. You're a conflicted lady. Yeah, that's everyone. Yeah. And also that for sure was like your script that you wrote. The first script you wrote was like that for sure. So that's really cool. Like, and I think I sort of identify with that niche too, in a lot of ways, in terms of the lost feeling. And also I'm always sort of drawn to any art that like features some sort of a lost and a found, or like the idea of restarting, new beginnings, going to new places and thinking like that will change or whatever. And it's just always sort of like, oh, fuck, Andy's still here. But then I'm like, each time I do that though, I like Andy a little bit more because I'm like, oh, Andy, you know, he's not so terrible. I took a consult with a decision. It was like sort of someone consulting for decision-making basically, because I feel like I'm very indecisive and I want to do everything. And I don't know what the right thing is, or I knowing that there isn't a right thing, right? And so, and I'm just even talking about it to you, it's like, it's indicative of how my brain works, where it's like, I qualify everything I say because I have no idea what is real, really. But she basically sort of was doing the niche thing. She was sort of like, okay, like and she wasn't necessarily saying like, what is your brand? I think sometimes that is more like, I think maybe that is sort of a way to think about it in a monetary sense, or like brand doesn't necessarily mean that, but it's sort of like, what is the core you? What is the core wants and desires and things for yourself? And then every decision that you make, and it's not just for art, it'd be for everything. Does it line up with that? You know, and this lined up with like, a couple of days ago, there was a Christmas party. Someone texted saying, hey, you know, me and my wife are like, we have a cold, but we tested negative for COVID. Like, can we come to the holiday party? Anyone have any problems? And there's silence. And I'm just like, I have problems. Like, this is like, what does a test do or mean? But I was just like, no one's going to say anything. I also knew this guy the least, but I'm like, no, like this, I have to speak up. I have to be the one to do this. This does feel like the Andy thing, even though I don't like to do it, but like, I have to voice what like my comfort and live by that thing. And so I don't know, that's where I'm at now of like, okay, I need to figure out whatever, I guess I need the niche. And then it's like sort of the top of the pyramid, right? And then everything sort of filters through to the bottom, or like through everything. I was going to ask you, do you feel like you're playing that role as a parent?
Well, I think, I will say, I don't know how to answer that question. I will say that I feel like if it's a crossroads that I'm at always, like, I feel like that explains my whole, like, I know I want to be a parent. I know I want to be an actor. I'm not doing what I want to do acting wise right now or artistically. How the fuck do I do the other thing if I'm not doing the one thing? And I always felt like once I was a parent, my career could never take off. Like I always felt like that was somehow going to like hold me down. I would have to like toss in like my throw in the towel, get like a 9 to 5, figure out some way that I'm going to be like mildly happy or like, just like
right.
Go every day. Because like, as soon as I was niched, I was like, oh, like my biggest thing in life has always been like, I know I want to be a parent. Because I feel like a lot of women, especially in like the I guess like that I know artistically, everyone's so career driven that like a lot of people, they're like, I don't know if I want kids, or I don't know if I want kids yet, or like maybe at some point I'll want them, but right now I don't, you know what I mean? And I've definitely felt like I was in the minority of being like, I always want kids, like I want kids, but I'm not where I wanted to be yet. And it was like this really big struggle for me. And it felt like somehow wanting kids made me less of a threat or less of like a player in the game.
Right. Like an artist, less of an artist almost.
Yeah.
Right?
Like I could, or like even admitting that like took something away from like my drive artistically.
I think it sounds like, because I've talked a lot about in therapy, like sort of binary thinking. And the idea is sort of like you can be a parent or an artist, like, or like you can, and sort of you are in a way sort of taking away both too, because like, oh, I'm not satisfied in my work, but I can't be a parent until I'm satisfied in my work. And I definitely have that feeling too.
Yeah. And I want to say, like, when you talk about doing things for no money, have a fucking kid. You can't do things for no money. Right? Like it puts weird things into perspective. You know what I mean? Like even before I was going to have kids, I was like I'm like Googling things like, okay, what do like actors, moms do, like new, like actors who haven't made it though. Like, I don't want to hear from fucking Gwyneth Paltrow and how hard her life is, like the actors who haven't made it yet. I'm like, where do we fall?
Yes.
Oh, like, even like, even the person who's like, oh, like I'm a series regular on this. I'm like, but no one knows who I am. It's like, but you're still a series regular. So like, I can't really, you're in a different boat than me. You're
making enough money. Yeah.
Right. Or like enough people know you to like bring you in on something else. You know what I mean? Like your career has started. Like, I feel like I've planted a shit ton of seeds that have not like sprouted yet, So I'm like, I need to hear from those people. And it's hard to track those people down. You know what I mean? Like it really is. But I will say like the resounding thing was that like, you don't have time to fuck around anymore. So like, it becomes like I feel like when I prepare for things or whatever, like, I spend the first however long freaking the fuck out that I'm no good at anything.
Oh yeah. The imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Right. So you've got like, you're like, I read it through the first time. You're like, I'm so connected. You read it the next time and you're like, I have no fucking clue what this is about. Now I have to read it 75 more times and like to theorize on things. And you're like, no, it's a conversation between two people. You know exactly what the fuck's going on. You're just like not naming it, or you're giving yourself outs, or you're getting distracted or whatever. And like, you just don't have time to do that. So I feel like it allows you, it also empowers you to like make decisions where you're like, that I will make time for because that is important. And I don't know what you do artistically, but I know as an actor, you're constantly like, oh, somebody give me a part. Can someone give me a part? Like, that's why I wrote my own pilot, because I didn't want to do that anymore. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's always like, I feel like as an actor, you're like at the bottom, you're like, who wrote something? Who's directing something?
Right.
Help me out in a sense. Or like, I'm here to do whatever. Oh, it's unpaid, but like I can perform, or like I can be in a short film that's unpaid and like you're not going to feed us and like there's going to be no heat on, but that's really fine because like I am going to be in like a 2-page short film. So like,
oh yeah. And you'll get
you know what I mean?
Yeah. You'll get to be a hooker again. Right.
Right. Or like, I'm the dead hooker. I've already died, but I will do it. I will hold my breath. Like you will do anything to like, and in a way, like it's because you're so hungry and like, that's such a good thing. And like, so you don't, to be like, oh, I wish I didn't do that in my life would be insane because like the only reason you know it was fucking stupid is because you did it. But like it also all contributed to like who I am now, like, and being able to be like, no, I did do that because I thought like I was doing the legwork this whole time.
Well, those were planting seeds, right? Like on that set where you're holding your breath as dead sex worker. And I wanted to like, we've been saying hooker and I'm like, no, let's be more positive about it. The sex worker, like you could have met your best friend or, you know, someone who was the AD or whatever it is, PA, well, whoever it is, like might notice you or might connect with you. And that's sort of, that honestly is why it's hard for me to say no to things. And it's the sort of same way where I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't really want to do anything, but I also want to do everything. It's that sort of a thing. And I just feel like, well, if I say no to this thing, that's going to be the thing where I should have gone. That's always how I think about it.
Yeah. And sure. And there's always, but if you look at it, like sometimes other doors won't open until you close one. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have that many doors open all the time. But I think
for your heat bill.
What?
Oh, I just said it's bad for your energy bill. Like all the, like the drafting. Yeah, no, whatever. Sorry. It was a bad joke.
Go. No. Oh, your energy bill. But I didn't even hear you say bill. I was like, yeah, it is bad for your energy. Also your energy. Just like
yes.
I will say I have a friend and it's been, I mean, she's got 2 kids. Now they're like 10, but she's like, was a dancer, transitioned to like actor, writer, producer. And she's made this entire transition since having children. And like, she's also like a personal trainer because like, and that's where she makes like her money. But in, you know, the 10 years her kids have been alive, she's done so much and completely changed her trajectory herself. And every time I talk to her, it's such like a breath of fresh air about parenting because she's European. And I think they have like an outlook that's slightly different on parenting than American people do. So she, like people will talk about, and I go, people keep telling me to get on a nap schedule. And she's like, oh, fuck that nap schedule. She's like, they will adapt to you. Like, you're fine. You didn't have kids to change your whole life. These kids will fit into your life. And like, all you need to do is love them and like feed them and clothe them and keep them in a house. She's like, that's literally all they need. And she's so like, you see the love like oozing out of her about her children, but it's just such a different, like, it's not like, oh, I have, and even I see it like my infant has like 16 chairs. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. She has like 16 chairs. 16 chairs? I don't know. But like, I keep just trying to be like, or even if I'm like, well, I'm not, maybe I won't be making as much money as someone else or blah, blah, blah. Like if I continue my artistic, whatever. And it's just like, you love that kid so much. And like, your kid's going to think you're the shit that you have a podcast and that you do this and you do that. And that you like still go after stuff that you want. Right.
Rather than.
Yeah. I keep trying to say to myself, like, what am I trying to teach my kid? That they should throw it in the towel and give up everything for like, no, like you can do it all. You can do whatever it is that you want. Not like I want to do it all, but I have my list of things that I want.
Right.
And like, I just and it's a constant reminder. It's a constant reminder to be having to do it because you're like, oh, I do need constant health insurance and I do need this and blah, blah, blah. And there are some differences, but then you have to be like, I guess like innovative and you have to like figure out how you're going to get health insurance or what you're going to do. And you might have to be more calculated about things, I think for sure. And I'm finding that out. Like even when I think about like, how long am I going to continue teaching? Because I know that's not the bag, but am I going to continue just throughout this year? Or am I going to try to push it one extra year? Like we're trying to buy a house that looks great if you have steady income, right? So like, when can we close on this house? That has a lot to do with when I give up this job. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, no, it's all
being a little bit more practical about things, which is something that I'm like, not like, I'm not a, let me be organized in all my decision-making.
Right.
But it's just like, it really is bringing out like a new skill in both me and my husband, because he's a voice actor.
Okay.
And now he's like the GM of a restaurant, which is like his
teaching
stability thing. Right.
Right.
I think he likes it more than I like to, but whatever. But we're both being like tested in a lot of ways, which is like exhausting and like scary, but it's also like exciting in the sense that like we're figuring all this stuff out in our, like, we didn't come from families where like people were artists. Like everybody had like stable,
right.
You know, like my mother, who's right here, she's a musician, but she was a teacher. So there was still like the stability of teaching. She's like, I'm an artist. She's like piping in from the kitchen.
Hi, Mom. You're an artist.
This is Andy. Andy says hi. But there was always this like, or like they never switched careers. Everyone had the same career. And same with like my husband's parents. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like the whole switch. It's like you didn't see like people switch careers when they were 40 and be or 30 or whatever and be like, oh, and it's fine. You figure it out. Like those like pieces were laid in place from when they got out of college to way before they had kids. So it's just like, I feel like we're both kind of just like holding on to each other, being like, we're doing this, right? Like we're figuring it out, right?
It's obviously very helpful to have that person, have someone you're with in it, but also like that what you're saying is like you're learning and figuring it out on the fly, but that's sort of what an artist is too, right? It's sort of experimenting and who knows if this is going to work and you're learning about yourself, and that's sort of the whole thing. So it's feeding you in sort of maybe a different way, but also. Yeah.
I think it seems like it's forcing me to be a little bit, and like therapy helps with this too, obviously, to be like, oh no, I can do that. Like, even when I think about like, okay, well, I went to school, like, why am I scared to like try and get an editing job when I went to school for television production and like editing? You know what I mean? Granted, it was like a decade, I graduated a long time ago, but it's like, I have that skill set.
Right.
Do I need to brush up on it? Sure. But like, you know what you're doing. And I feel like owning the things that I'm trying to learn, to continuously learn, to like own the things that I know I can do. So it's like, okay, I leave this job. I know I can get a job doing this. Am I going to get the first job I interview for? Maybe not. Like, is it going to take a bit? Maybe. But like trying to just, instead of being like, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can do that. It's like, no, like now you have a fucking kid. So like you actually have to do that. If that's the move, you have to. It's not the move in a month or a year or whatever, fine. You'll like pivot.
So yeah, it definitely sort of streamlines your thinking. But also it's just, there's less time to think, and actually probably your exhaustion levels probably make it like the overthinking is gone. You can't do it anymore. You just act. And that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And I shout out and hugs to my sister. We had this talk the other day and I was like, I forget where we were, how it even came to be. And she goes, no, I've never seen you this just like grounded. She's like, I feel like having a baby has really like grounded you in like a great way. And I was like, wow, thank you. That was so nice of you. Thank you so much. But it really does like help you, like allow you to pinpoint your priorities. And like, there's no, like the weirdest parent feeling, I'll tell you, because people will be like, you know, when people have their kids and they announce on their birth thing, like, we're so in love with you already. And I'm like, you've known them for 3 hours. Like, I didn't feel that way. Now, I've been told that it's easier when it's your second kid because you already know that you like take them in. I've been like, my older sister was like, your second kid, like everything just comes a lot quicker because like you've already taken the kid, you know what's going to happen. It's already not just you and your partner. There's already like a family aspect.
You've watched the movie before. You know, you like this movie. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So for me though, I was like, all I knew when I knew like two things. I knew that the kid was like familiar to me, right? I knew she was familiar. I was like, I know her somehow. I don't know how I know her, but like, she's mine. Like, I can tell, you know? But I was also just like, I was really, well, I guess I was very fascinated by everything she did because I thought I would feel like ownership over her, right? Like when I first had her. And I didn't. I was like, oh my God, this kid is like her own. She does things on her own. I don't have to, like, she's just her own being. And like, I feel like what I've heard parents say, or like what you assume, like, you're my kid, or this is my kid, or la, 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 la. When I first was here, I was like, you're cool. I don't really know you. Like everything you do is like fascinating and a mystery. And then I was blown away by how much I missed her, but I didn't like know I was going to miss her. So like I'd wake up and she'd wake me up in the morning. And as soon as I like got to her crib, I was like, holy shit, all I wanted was for you to go to sleep last night. And I have missed you so much. And I like didn't even realize, like you just see them and you're like, I missed you for like the 3 hours you were sleeping. It was like, it's like a bizarre, very bizarre feeling. And now that she's getting older and I feel like she's more of I know her even more, like, you know, the feelings are changing and constantly changing and blah, blah, blah. But I am always struck by like how much I miss her.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like even when I haven't been around her for like 2 hours, I'm like, how does that even happen?
Do you miss her now?
No, but when I see her,
oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's when it hits me when I'm like, I had no idea how much I really missed you when I was away from you. That's I hear her crying. So like, I don't miss her at all. Right.
Well, that like reminds me of like when you see old friends or people that you sort of, like, well, even this, like we never were very close at all, even when we knew each other, but this sort of feels like, oh, I missed Elissa somehow. Like, I just feel like I have this grief of like, oh, I didn't know you for 11 years. Like, and now what's exciting is that I'm getting to know you. And that's really cool.
Yeah. That's true. I guess that is a feeling that like, yes, that's the feeling when you're like, oh, I don't want to put pants on and go see this person. I don't. And then you finally get to the party and you're like, I'm so glad I came. And I didn't have to wear pants. I didn't think that was, I designed this to not have to wear pants.
You mentioned something about how like your kids will love you for not giving up or doing the things that you're passionate about. And then I was sort of also thinking about the idea of the other way around of, you know, you take the job that you clearly don't like because it's safe, it's secure, and it's for your kid almost. There's that sort of thing. And to me, that's pressure and expectation on the kid. Sort of like, oh, my parents didn't do what they wanted to do because I'm more important or something, or like, and it's like, oh, fuck, it's on me. And I'm not saying my parents necessarily did that, but I just like that pressure. It seems like what we were talking about at the beginning too, about just how it feels like kids have more and more pressure on it. I think that extends to what you're saying about like the nap schedule. Like if we hack parenting to the point where like everything is manageable and good, then we can manage these kids to be successful or great or whatever they're supposed to be. And that doesn't leave the room for the kid to be who they want to be.
I think that says it all, what they're supposed to be. What are they supposed to be?
God, I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Yeah.
There's such high expectations. Exactly. And like it all, like it stems from 1,000% like love. And I feel like one of those things that I have had to like, you know, talk myself off the ledge like a lot of times, but I'm like, my parents, it's not like they were like, we are teachers because we have kids. Like that's what they both wanted. But at the same time, like they saved for us to go to college. They did this, they did that. Like we had everything and more than, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I sometimes am like, well, what if I don't make enough money, or what if it takes me too like what if I can't provide as good a life for my kids as my parents provided for me? Because that's been the whole thing, right? Like
right. And
everyone came to America, we want a better life. So like the future generations, everything is for the future, the generation, blah, blah, blah. And I sit here being like, am I just fucking selfish? Because like, I'm thinking about me and like not the future. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, but also like you're taking care of yourself too. But I don't think there's a yes or no or right or wrong thing to do this, but I totally agree because I have that thought too of like, yeah, like, I mean, I'm describing parents that are giving their lives for their kids and saying like that's amazing and selfless and sort of like there's some sort of honor in that too. I don't know what, like, I'm not disparaging anyone who does that. It's just sort of like, I was trying to sing it from the other side of like, God, that is hard to be on the receiving end kind of too.
Right. At the end of the day, like whatever the decision, like everybody's going to be fine. Like, you know, and I think I have to do just a lot of like reminding myself of those things. If you set certain expectations, like chances are you're going to fall short, right? Like if the more expectations you have on things, the more disappointed you're going to be, as opposed to just like letting things play out moment to moment. This is what needs to be done right now. It's not set in stone for the rest of my life. It's not set in stone for 3 months from now, but it's like what needs to be done right now. And if we can just like get through what needs to be done right now. And I think that's what, you know, my husband and I are just like trying to focus on like
sort of one day at a time. Right. Yeah. I think that's where a lot of the anxiety for me comes from. It is those expectations are also sort of the building up of events, like of things that I have to do. They become harder the more I think about it, the more I don't do it, the more, especially since oftentimes they seem like they're in the future. Like, oh, this is in a month. And I sort of live my life like building up to this thing that I'm terrified about. And it never, and I have all these expectations, but I'm also not necessarily preparing in the way that I want. I'm just sort of like, it's just fear. And it's on the horizon. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it's here. And then I'm like, ooh, what's the next thing I can be scared about? But I'm still doing them. But yeah, that was sort of when I realized, oh, I need anxiety meds. Cause it's like, I'm sort of living my life like that. And I think that's helped me sort of be like, okay, I just need to just live and keep going. But also the living with expectations or hopes, I think is important. Whether, you know, I think I just watched the new Spider-Man and it was like, one of the things was like MJ, like she's always expecting disappointment. So you can't get hurt, that classic thing. And sort of the arc is sort of to like, no, I mean, yes, it hurts to be disappointed. It hurts to be crushed and have sad things happen, but also like we need to, that's why we're artists because we're dreaming about something better or connecting at least with like-minded people that feel these same things of like, oh, I'm lost and I don't know what the fuck to do. And that's like all there is. It's just sort of finding like-minded, I don't know, finding a friend. That's what this show is. I just had to ask this because your daughter's name is Joey. And for me, that immediately set off alarm bells of Dawson's Creek, Josephine Potter, which I know her character is named after Josephine in Little Women. So when this happened...
Oh, is she? I didn't even know she was named after Joe in Little Women. I did not know that.
Exactly. So is there any connection to that? Or is that just... Yeah.
Yes. Well, yes. But let me tell you the whole thing. So before we had even like started the discussion of like, let's have kids, Brian and I, that's my husband, we were talking and we were like brainstorming names, you know, as one does on a Friday night.
I've been there. Yeah.
And he was like, what about Joey? And for a girl. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. Like Joey was my favorite character in my favorite show growing up. Blah, blah, blah. Also, like obviously Little Women fan who's not, if I'm going to be anyone, I'm going to be Joe. P.S. like shout out to Greta Gerwig's remake because it's phenomenal. You've seen it.
It's great. It's great. Yeah.
No. And Saoirse Ronan in that part is just like the best.
Oh, can I tell a real quick interlude on that terrified me? I watched it with my family and my sister right next to me, and she identified with the sister who burns Joe's script. And I remember
Amy.
Amy, Florence Pugh. And like, that just terrified me. Like, as like, this is my sister and she's like, but also there's something
You're like hiding all your manuscripts.
yeah, I'm hiding them all. But also it's just sort of like, it spoke to our relationship of maybe she felt like the sort of the younger, well, she is the younger child, but also like sort of the forgotten baby, even though I don't think that's at all what it is. Now I feel the other way. Like she's the star and I'm the one who wants to burn her manuscripts. But anyway, continue back to
I'm so fascinated by siblings. That just makes me like birth order siblings, why we do what we do. Anyway, another conversation for another day. But so yes. And I had the American Girl doll, Josephina, growing up, who I called Joey. That was like her name. Like, but I will say, I hadn't even, so when my husband had said, like, what about Joey for girl? All these things went into my mind, right? And then a few days later, I was like, oh my God, your dad's name is Joe. And like, didn't even put that together at first. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, cool, whatever. So we had thought, and then we had blah, 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 blah. And then we were between Joey and another name. And my husband's dad ended up passing away when I was 5 months pregnant.
Oh. Right here.
And in that, all of that, there was just like no question.
Right.
So, and I couldn't imagine my daughter being named Josephine. Just doesn't seem like she would be my kid.
Right.
So it's just Joey.
Just Joey.
Just Joey.
Yeah. And probably going to call her Joe. I mean, I definitely will if I ever meet her, calling her Joe.
Right?
Yeah.
So cool. It's so cool. It's
it is the coolest thing. And I'm like, I feel like this is sort of what I wanted to name my daughter. Now I'm like, no. No, I wanted
and people kept saying, because they were like, everyone gives you their opinions on baby names, right? Course. And people would be like, well, what about Josephine? Like, you can call her Joey. And I'm like, yeah, you could. But then like everything that's monogrammed is going to say Josephine as opposed to Joey, which is like the name that I want. But also people are like, well, what if they can't tell if she's a boy or a girl? Like, that's going to be whatever. And I was like, great. Like, I hope they think she's a boy and they bring her in on all these job interviews that she wouldn't get if she were a girl. Like, fantastic. Yeah. I hope it works at her advantage.
Well, I'm thinking all of our kids are going to be non-binary anyway. Like, right. I wish that I could be like, right. I had that.
Your name is, I love the name Andy for a girl too.
Oh, yeah. And of course there's a character in Dawson's Creek named Andy, a girl.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Casey's first love.
Yes.
Yeah. What I was going to say, my prediction, this is an Andy prediction, and you can hit me up in 15 years when this will happen. Okay. So you want Joey for her name. And I respect and agree with your decision. My guess will be that your daughter will at least have a phase, maybe longer, where she's like, I'm going to go by Josephine. I'm anticipating that, and I think it'll be great.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, because I'm like, she's going to find some reason to hate whatever name I give her. So like, isn't that what we always do?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like in mine, remember we were talking about my name pronunciation, right?
Yes.
So my grandmother's name is Eleanor. My mother's name is Elaine, and my name is Elissa. My mom's name is like spelled differently than the typical Elaine, and people always pronounce it wrong. And it makes her so mad, right? And people always pronounce my name wrong, and it makes me so mad. And I'm like, but Mom, you did to me exactly the thing that you wish your mom didn't do to you. So I'm like, whatever I named her, she's going to be pissed about it, I'm sure. Like, more power to her.
Yeah. Everyone will be able to pronounce her name. I think that won't be a problem.
Right. Plus the amount of people, because her name is Joey Rain, like the amount of people who have been like, oh, she already sounds like a rock star. I'm like, you can't be mad at that. I gave you a rock star name.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like a stage name already.
And a name is just, what is a name anyway? It's just a first draft. You can do whatever. I mean, because I was obviously named Andrew. And I think as a kid, I was like, I'm Andy, And then in college, it was the only time where I was like, maybe I should have like the adult name. And I tried it and I was like, no, I'm not an Andrew. And I still sort of have that feeling of like, Andy is just it feels like a kid name. It's the guy from Toy Story, but it's like, I think I am that. So it fits.
Yeah, it totally, I never even I mean, weirdly, not like I spend like, nights staying up thinking about you all the time. But I was like, I never was like, and his name must be Andrew. I've never even thought that.
I would be shocked if you had one night where you
maybe it'll be tonight. Who knows?
You'll be obsessing over all the things that you said and should have said. So right. Speaking of, this is your opportunity. Is there anything that you like came in here like really wanting to share or really wanting to say that we haven't really got into? I mean, I think we've gone like into wonderful directions. So I could look at the things that I haven't asked you, and most of them I didn't ask you, but like I'm good, but I wanted to actually, okay, I do have a question.
Ask me.
Because you said, like now you're sort of
prepared for this. You got to ask me.
You lived your life. That was your preparation. I hope you didn't do much more. Sounds like you did. This was a role, right? Podcast guest.
It lines up with my niche. So.
Yeah, it does. It does. What if I just asked you to hold your breath and be dead for the whole episode?
Story of my life, man. No. Just kidding.
No, it's not. Because like you now are sort of on the other side of like, okay, there's no you're not going to have the kid, the job, all like everything's not going to be laid out perfectly for you to have those decisions. I know that too. It's just still hard to sort of feel like the when is it ready moment, and there isn't one. But I was wondering when you sort of gave yourself permission to have a kid. Like, what was there a moment, or like what happened for that?
I mean, first of all, we were in like the height of the pandemic, right? Well, not the height of the pandemic, I guess, I guess last, October, I got pregnant. So like, it was still like, I was teaching from home. Everything was remote. Right. Like we weren't going out. I think that being both artists, we were always like, it was always like we had so much going. We were always auditioning in this and our side jobs and blah, 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 that it was always like a thought, but it was never like, let's start doing it at this time. Let's start doing it at this time. And then when everything shut down, we lost our jobs and we were supposed to get married in April, like right as the world shut down. And our wedding got obviously postponed. So we pushed it back and then it got postponed again. So we ended up like getting married in like the backyard of his parents' house last October. I'm trying to think what gave us the permission, but I think it was kind of like, we were like, what is anything? We've been working really hard towards like getting, places in our career. The entire world is like ass backwards right now. We're hibernating in our apartment. And I think it was just, I remember when our wedding got postponed, I said to him, I was like, this can't mean that we're putting off having kids though. And he's like, okay, and it was like one of those things. And I'd be like, no, because like, I know you want to be married before because you're traditional in that sense. And like, this is really like screwing with my plans, and one day it was just like, oh, should we just like start to like, decide we're going to start to try to do it now. And it was just like, okay, it was I don't know what changed. I think like circumstances had a lot to do with it. And the fact that like our jobs, define so much of who we are, yet like for them to be taken away from us in like a second. And like, we're like, well, what do we do now? Well, I guess we'll have a kid since we don't, nothing else much is going on.
I'm going to play that back for Joey in 15 minutes.
Yeah, right? But like that, I think it was always in our mind, and that was just like on our mind, but that was just like the extra push that needed to be. And I think it's just like, it's completely like a conscious, I don't think there's going to be like some big, like amazing moment that I always thought there would be. Like, right. Oh, now I'll know I'm ready. Now I'll know I'm ready. It's like, what is that? I feel like we just made a decision and then
went forward.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what you're doing as a parent now too. So it's almost like the first step of that was like, okay, stop thinking about some ideal future that won't happen or some moment, which I mean, as a writer is definitely, I always remind myself, okay, yeah, life isn't a movie, but God, wouldn't it be nice if it was, or like, that sort of a thing. But that does seem like it was a conscious choice, but also like, okay, we're not going to just sort of heading up some path or like expecting it to be like over the crest. There's going to be a sign that says baby time, it's just, let's just start. And I guess it was just sort of, you've both felt it.
Yeah. And just being okay, I think, as we kind of touched on before, being like, okay, I want this and I want it now. I'd like to get this started now. And that's, I think, just like there's like an ownership in that of being like, this is what I want. It's okay to want it. I want it to happen now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm glad we had this conversation now, Elissa. And I want to end with the question I ask all my guests of, how can I be the best friend for you going forward? Or how can we take this sort of relationship forward now that we're apparently, I hope we're friends now.
I would think so.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I just didn't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, right. Thank you. But yes, the feeling's mutual. We're friends. I don't, I mean, I feel like, it's been really nice is that even since reaching out, I felt like immediate support from you about just like every facet of my life, not this, not that. And like, of course, like, I feel like when you were saying, I'd love to talk to you because I want to have kids and that's probably the next phase. And I'm just genuinely like, whoa. And like, that's exactly how I felt. Like, I felt like I always wanted to be like, I just want to talk to like a parent who's like doing it and has all these same fears and all this anxiety and all this same like excitement for it, but like something,
holding you back.
Some hold up, whether it's financial, whether it's actual like logistical scheduling, that kind of thing, whether it's some deep-seated internal thing that you can't, like whatever it is. And I'm sure it's a combination of everything.
Yes.
And like, it's still super scary, but I feel like once she was born, things became less scary in the sense that like, there was no more like, well, what if this happens or what if this happens? Mm-hmm. It's just like, what will be, what will be. Like throughout my whole pregnancy, it was just like, are we prepared? Can we do this? Can we do that? Like, did we do everything? Blah, 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 blah. And now it's kind of just like, it's a day-to-day thing.
Right.
It's not like this, like, oh, parenthood. It's like, no, that's just what we're living now.
Yes.
So just like everything is a practice as opposed to a hypothetical, which makes it easier. I mean, it's harder. It's way harder now that she's out. But like, you know what I mean? Like the decision-making, the incessant like contemplation about everything. It's there in certain ways, but it's also like each day you make a decision, you're like, oh, I did that. I was able to do that. I was able to do that. And another good piece of advice that I heard from like my husband's, one of his best friend's wives was actually like, she was like, oh, you're overwhelmed. She goes, she has like 2 like middle schoolers. And she's like, I live in that space and am overwhelmed by decisions I have to make for them every day. And she's been parenting for over a decade. So it's just like, I don't think it is something that stops the overwhelm. It's in a different way.
Right. It's going to be overwhelming forever. Yay. And that's like,
but it was like weirdly reassuring, right? It's not yet.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, you've been doing it. You look like you live, like you always have the holiday card out in time. Like you always, like everything seems picture perfect. And you're like, oh no, you're just real. Like this is overwhelming day in and day out. You're responsible for another human or other humans.
Yes.
From that like love that you have for them and wanting everything to be amazing, like that is, so much pressure, but it does. She was always like, just give yourself like some grace, like be nice to yourself. And I was just like, that's the whole bag. And I mean, remembering to do that, not easy, but in the moments where you do remember it, or you do, acknowledge your wins, what you've accomplished, how you've changed, even in like 5 months, how much our lives have changed and how much we've, done, how much the decisions we've made and blah, 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 that we'll continue to make. Like, it is kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of, I can even like, we just sort of like have gotten a small piece of you in the last 5 months, the last year and a half of your, this journey. And, I think that's a great thing. Like that's a great friend, this person that you're talking about. And I think I would like to be that for you and vice versa, where we can like remind each other to be nice to ourselves or nicer to ourselves. I think we all need to practice that. And so, yeah, Elissa, thank you so much for answering the call, for being on here.
Thanks for having me.
I really liked getting glimpses of your family too in the background.
They're so supportive. They're always around. It's great.
Like they were audience for this. So you'll have to tell me what they're give me what like the notes they have for me so I can learn.
Right. Listen, you're actually not that great a parent, Tone it down. No, they would never. They would never.
I meant for me. I don't care about. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, right. Oh no, they've been cheering. They're already cheering you on. They're psyched about this.
Thank you. I needed to
have some new subscribers.
Yes. The parent demo is my best demo. And that's why I reached out to you. Now that you're a parent, I'm like, okay, I got this now.
It's true. It's an important demographic to have.
It is. And I guess I'm, about to join it at some point. Stay tuned. But yeah.
I love it. And I love how open you are about that. So just like, I got nothing for love, but nothing but love for you and your partner and like your whole bag. Like you're going to crush whatever you decide to do whenever you decide to do it.
Oh, back at you. As we start this new year, which often becomes a completely arbitrary way to weaponize time against ourselves, follow Elissa's advice. Give yourself some grace. Be nice to yourself. Since reconnecting with her, Elissa has certainly given me that grace, and that gives me that jittery, exciting feeling of connection, of finding a new friend. I'm excited to see where that leads, and I'm so grateful to Elissa for joining me and trusting me, and to you all for listening to our conversation. If, like me, you want to follow Elissa's journey as a parent and artist, follow her on Instagram at EVKlie, that is EVKLIE on Instagram. And you can find the soundtrack to Elissa's life and all others on the Naked Man Spotify page. Please give us that sexy 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell all your friends and acting coaches. And you can follow me at Wandering Green and the show at Naked Man Pod on Instagram. And don't hesitate to reach out to us at nakedmanpod@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts or feelings you'd like to share, perhaps about your readiness or lack thereof to be a parent, call and leave a message at the Naked Man phone line at 747-231-7120. Next time on the Naked Man podcast, in all likelihood, another scandalous monologue. But in the meantime, as my dad always says, be sweet. This episode of the Naked Man podcast was conceived by Andy Green and Elissa Klie. The Naked Man is a podcast hosted, created, and produced by me, Andy Green. All music was composed by Robert Panico, and all graphics were created by Christopher Miles.